That's good. Better than not, right? No, I didn't know nothing about it. When I saw the post on Facebook. I ain't gonna dress up here. That ain't what I'm gonna have. Now, but as a people, good morning. Welcome to Robertson County Church of Christ. It's good to see everyone here this morning. You want to turn number 929. Number 929.
glorify your name. We'll sing this song and we'll be led in scripture. Number 929. Let us all sing. Number 929. Father, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify your name in all the earth. Glorify your name. Glorify your name. Glorify your name in all the earth. Jesus, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify your name in all the earth. Glorify your name. Glorify your name. Glorify your name in all the earth. Spirit, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify your name in all the earth. Glorify your name. Glorify your name. Glorify your name in all the earth.
Good to see you. Today's Bible reading is a challenge to those who are Christians to live a different type of life. And so often this is brought up in the scriptures. 1 Peter 2, 1 through 12 is 1 Peter 2, 1 through 2. Wherefore, laying aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and all evil speaking, when you do that, you go to the mouth. As newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. If so, you have tasted that the Lord is gracious, whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. Ye also are lively stones, built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices, except for God by Jesus Christ. And therefore, it is also contained in the scriptures, behold, I lay a sign and chief cornerstone, precious. He that believeth on him shall not be confounded. On you therefore which believe he is precious. of them which be disobedient. The stone which is the builders is disallowed. The stone is made the head of the corner. And a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, word you also do. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, that you should show forth the praises of him which called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lust, which war against the soul, having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, and whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation or in the day of judgment.
Our next song is number 419. Number 419. Lord, we come before thee now. We'll sing this song and then we'll have our prayer. Number 419. Lord, we come before thee now, and thy feet we humbly bow. Oh, do not our sweetness sing, shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? Shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? Lord, on thee our souls depend. In compassion now descend. Fill our hearts with thy rich grace, to love and to sing thy praise, to love and to sing thy praise. In thine own appointed way, now we seek thee, here we stay. Lord, we know not how to go, till of blessing thou be so. Till of blessing thou be so. Grant that all they seek and find thee, our God, suffering behind. Heal the sick, the captive free. Let us all rejoice in thee. Let us all rejoice in thee.
Down, please. Our God and Father, what a great privilege we have this day and honor to worship you, Father, to come before your throne and sing praises to you, to approach you in prayer, to hear your word. We can remember that sacrifice that Christ made on our behalf. Father, we pray as we enter into this worship, as we go through it, that we can direct our minds solely on you, that we can bring our best to you, that we can put out distractions, and that we can understand the importance of this hour, this time that we have before us, and we can bring honor and glory to your name in all that we do. Father, we're so thankful for your word, which guides us. We're thankful for the Spirit that has has given every word to us that we know what we can do in this life to be pleasing in your sight. We may be found faithful, and we can teach others, and we can be examples to the community. Help us, Father, to do all we can to cherish it and to use it every day of our lives. We're thankful for every member of this congregation. We have many, Father, that are sick, that are suffering on a regular basis, that need encouragement, that need healing. We pray, Father, that we can do all that we can to help them, and that you will give them a day of rest. We pray, Father, for those that have family members that are battling severe illnesses and terrible things. We pray, especially at this time, for Wayne Ellis and his treatments, and we pray for their family that they can have encouragement. We pray, Father, for this country. We have many evil things going on. We know that you have blessed us tremendously in this country, and that if we couldn't have anything if it weren't for you. Help us, Father, to direct our lives, that we can influence this other citizens, that there is something greater in this world than what we have here, that is the home in heaven, that we can encourage one another to strive for that. Father, we pray that you'll be the speaker of the hour, and he has a good recollection of what he prepared, that we as listeners can do all we can to focus and make application in our lives. We pray, Father, that you will be with our efforts here, that we can build up this community, that we can build up this congregation, and that we can support work around the world. We pray, Father, for those that are working in foreign fields, that you will protect them and give them success. Father, we pray that you will now go with us through the remainder of the service and through our lives, and save us in the end if we're found faithful. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Our next song is number 746. Number 746. When he comes in glory. Number 746. Oh, how sweet will be to meet the Lord when he comes in glory by and by. What a song of praise will be our Lord when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet, when he comes in the sky. What joy, when he comes in glory by and by. We will have our robes all white as snow when he comes in glory by and by. Oh, be ready with the Lord to go when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet will be when he comes in the skies. What joy, when he comes in glory by and by. I will longing for that happy day when he comes in glory by and by. For with him I hope to soar away when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet will be, when he comes in the skies. What joy, when he comes in glory by and by. Our next song is number 669. Number 669. It says, My Father's World. Number 669. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and proudly rings the music of the Spirit. This is my Father's world. I rest in the calm of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, and the waters flow. This is my Father's world. The first their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I give him back. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, that he never forget that though the wrongs he talks so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let heaven ring. God reigns, let earth be glad. So this song like Mark number 744. Mark 744. We'll use that as our invitation song after the lesson. Then the song before the lesson will be number 738. Number 738. We will glorify the King of Kings. If you'd like to stand as we sing tonight. Number 738. We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. We will bow before his throne. We will worship him in righteousness. We will worship him alone. He is Lord of heaven, Lord of earth. He is Lord of all who live. He is Lord above the universe. All praise to him we give. Hallelujah to the King of Kings. Hallelujah to the Lamb. Hallelujah to the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. See it, please.
Morning, it's good to be with you. Good to have everyone here today. beautiful day, a beautiful opportunity, and a great time to think about our lives and eternity and God. Things that are important in life. I'm glad that you're here. There's many that are sick, some that are traveling. We want to pray for their safety and recovery, and pray that we might grow closer together and closer to God. This morning, we want to think about our worship. We want to talk about worship. Is it from the lips or is it from the heart? I want us to consider seriously how effectively we worship and if we are actually worshiping effectively. Jesus said in Matthew 15:8-9, "This people draweth nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men." Jesus here was alluding to Isaiah 29 and verse 13. Hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus even came on the scene. And back in that day, Isaiah, in talking to those people who were the children of God in that particular time, was challenging them to consider their worship. Mankind has always had a difficult time or a challenging time in offering true worship to God. At this time, when Isaiah was talking to these people, he was talking about how they weren't living appropriately and how that they were using the teachings of men as the guidelines for worship. So we see that man has had to deal with this problem for a long, long time. We have a lot of challenges in life. We have challenges when it comes to our work life. We have challenges when it comes to our family life. We have challenges in financial issues. We have challenges with health. We have challenges in our relationships. So, that's a part of life. The greatest thing or challenge we have is to make sure that when we worship God, we're doing it in the correct way. People like to think about different avenues or different things that are involved in worship. Even in the time of Jesus in John chapter 4, Jesus was discussing with the woman at the well there about worship. And the woman said in verse 19 there, John 4, the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." So there was a discussion about worship, even while Jesus was on this earth, about the different aspects of worship. And when we think about it, we need to consider all the things that are involved in worship in order to have a true worship towards God. And we've heard many sermons, and it's important for us to make sure that our worship is done in truth, or according to the practices that are laid out by the New Testament, so that we can effectively worship God. We know from the very beginning of time, when Cain and Abel came to worship, that the right way in worship requires that a man do it with the things or in the way, the mode that God has prescribed. And so that is very important. But I want us to think for just a few minutes this morning about the other part of worship. And that is the idea of where our heart is, where it comes from. We can do everything that we want correctly by offering our singing in the right way, praying, all the avenues of worship, but if our heart's not right, it makes no difference. I think we can tell a little bit about being right about our heart or within our hearts as far as our worship is concerned by the very phrase that we use when we talk about coming to worship God. Let me ask you this question, and I know that I'm guilty of the same thing, so I can and talking about myself here, but when you got up this morning and you discussed where you were going this morning, how did you say it? Did you say we're going to church? Or did you say we're going to worship? It makes a difference in how we think and where we're coming from when we talk about it. We do come together as the church, but the church is coming together for the point of worship. And so our mindset is completely different when we use the term church and when we use the term worship. And that's kind of what I want us to think about today. Do we have the right mindset? And is our spirit and our heart engaged in the right and proper way when we think about or when we go to worship? We think about how we worship and our attitude towards God in worship. It comes from an attitude of one who understands who God is. If you go back to the Old Testament, specifically in Daniel, you have in Daniel 2 and Daniel 3, we have the discussion of King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar was not an Israelite. He was a heathen king of Babylon. And so he came from the background of many different gods, a lot of different avenues of worship, and worshiping in many different ways by all the people that he conquered, by the people that he lived with, the people he grew up around. He didn't see worship in the same way that the Jews did. But he brought people into Babylon who were people who worshiped God correctly, truly. And so, in dealing with these people, Nebuchadnezzar came to know the true God. And in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 47, the king answered Daniel and said, "Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret." Nebuchadnezzar became aware of the true God and the true avenue of worship based upon this relationship with Daniel and the children of Israel. Specifically, Nebuchadnezzar came to know God because of the way that Daniel was able to answer the dream. Nebuchadnezzar knew who the true God was and had the right attitude towards God based upon the fact that Daniel showed that God works in areas where mankind has no grasp of what's going on. We're very limited in our knowledge of things. We're very limited in things about the world and what's going on. But yet, Nebuchadnezzar says, this is the true God because Daniel, he gave you the ability to tell me something that nobody could know anything about. And then when we think about how we worship God and our attitude toward God, Nebuchadnezzar also revealed something about our knowledge of God and its effect on worship in Daniel chapter 3, when we have the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In 3 and verse 28, it says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort." Nebuchadnezzar's heart towards God was changed because he saw that God was a God of power, that he was a God who could overcome any obstacle that stood in the way of those who truly trusted and loved him. And so his attitude was changed completely towards God. And when we look at God from the perspective of something more than just a God or just something, a part of our lives, then our worship will become something different. It won't be just a matter of form or fashion, but it will be a matter of something that we are truly engaged in, that is a part of our very being, fiber of our being. And that's what we're seeking to try to do, is to become a person who worships God, not just through the acts of worship, but because of the emotion, the feelings, and the knowledge that we have of God and who He is and what He truly means to us. Well, what about God produces a heart that worships? I think, first of all, when we think about what it takes in order to be a person who truly worships God in the right spirit, it comes from one who understands the true goodness of God. Think of what David had to say in Psalms 100, where he said, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before His presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, He is God. It is He that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people, and the sheep of His pasture. Enter into His gates with thanksgiving, and into His courts with praise. Be thankful unto Him, and bless His name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endureth to all generations." David, just by the expressions of this psalm, shows the deep connection that he had with God and how much he appreciated what God had done for him. You know, when we think about our attitude towards God as compared to David's attitude towards God, one of the key ingredients that I think can be found from Psalm 100 is what he says about, in verse number 3, It is He that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people, and the sheep of His pasture. David recognized that even in all the grandeur and glory of his life, and all that he had as a king, sitting upon the throne with all the subjects underneath him, he recognized that it was not of his own life or his own doing that he was who he was, but it was because of God Himself. It is God who had created him and given him everything that he had. Therefore, he became a man who could worship God with the spirit that was acceptable to God. So many times people come in to the worship period and they are of a mindset that, look what I am and look what I've got based on what I've done and how hard I've worked. But it's all because of God's goodness that we are what we have, and that produces a heart of worship. Well, secondly, what produces a heart of worship? A heart that understands the mercy and the grace of God. In 1 John 3 and verse 1, John says, Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew Him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when He shall appear, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. A heart that will worship God in the way that it's supposed to is one that recognizes His position in life and where He was and where He has come from. John says we are the children of God. We were without God and without hope in our lives because of the sin that we had committed in our lives. And the children of God are that, not because of the things that we've done in our lives. We have to be obedient to God. We have to do the things that Christ requires of us in order to become the children of God. But it is still only because of the grace and the mercy of Christ and the giving of His blood upon that cross that we have the right to be called the children of God. And when we understand it's not of our own merit and our own works, but because of God, we then become the kind of people who will worship God. And then thirdly, when we think about what produces a heart of worship, it is because we see the true glory of God Himself. Psalm 29, David said, Give unto the Lord, O ye mighty, give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto His name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. The voice of the Lord is upon the waters. The God of glory is thundereth. The Lord is upon many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaketh the cedars. Yea, the Lord breaketh the cedars of Lebanon. He maketh them also to skip like a calf. Lebanon and Sirion like the young unicorn. The voice of the Lord divideth the flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shaketh the wilderness. The Lord shaketh the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord maketh the hens to calves, and discovereth the horses. In His temple doth everyone speak of His glory. The Lord sitteth upon the flood, yea, the Lord sitteth King forever. The Lord will give strength unto His people. The Lord will bless His people with peace. God is the God of glory. Man's glory is only but a small thing in comparison to God. And the glory that we have is only because we are made by God and made in the image of God. Genesis 1 verse 26. We need to look at and see our place in the world and our place in relationship to God. When we see God in His glory, it causes one to have great honor and glory and worship towards God. One of the most wonderful songs that we sing, How Great Thou Art, is such a beautiful song and has such great meaning because it describes the glory and the honor of God, beginning with thinking about the very creation of God, and then proceeding on through and describing the great things that God has done in offering His Son as a sacrifice for us. And then thinking about His coming back to get us and to take us to true glory, a heavenly glory for eternity. When we think about that, how great God is and what God has done for us, and the glory that He's promised to us, it can't help but produce within us a true heart of worship. But it is a challenge, a great challenge. It's always been a challenge for mankind. You know, we need to understand that it disgusts God when we don't worship God with the right spirit and only try to produce for God worship by the means that He has proclaimed that we should do. Think about what was said in Isaiah 1:11. To what purpose is this multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? I am full of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of the fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of goats. When ye come to appear before me, who hath required this in your hand to tread my courts? Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination to me. To new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are trouble unto me, I am weary to bear them. And ye spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when you make many prayers, I will not hear you. Your hands are full of blood. God is describing the worship brought to Him by the Israelites in the Old Testament. He was disgusted with it. He said, be done with it. I want no more of it. When those Jews who thought that they were the children of God, who thought that they were in a relationship with God, brought their offerings to God, God said, I hate it. I don't want any more of it. That's concerning to me when I think about what my worship is when I come before God. Am I such a person that when I offer up my worship to God, He looks at me and He says, I hate it. I want to have nothing to do with it. It disgusts me. That's a very scary thought. We think about it. Think about what is said by Jesus about the hypocrisy that comes from the worship that is unacceptable to God. In Malachi, the Jews were just as guilty of having a hypocritical worship as were those people in Jesus' day. In Malachi 1:6, Malachi says to the children of Israel, a son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name. And ye say, wherein have we despised thy name? Think about what Malachi was saying about these children of Israel in Malachi chapter 1. Here these priests were coming to offer up their sacrifices to God, and God says, no, you're not offering up sacrifice to me. You despise me. Despising God and worshiping God in the same breath. How did they do that? They did that by verse number 7. You offer polluted bread upon mine altar, and ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say the table of the Lord is contemptible. And if ye offer a blind sacrifice, is it not evil? And if ye offer a lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto the governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts? These religious people were coming and offering sacrifices to God, and what were they doing? They were only offering it halfway. They didn't bring the right kind of sacrifice. They brought sacrifices that were blemished, that were not worthy to be offered. They were just getting rid of the things that they didn't really want and calling it sacrifice to God. We know the passage of Scripture in John 4 verse 24 so very well. Worship God in spirit and in truth. These people were only bringing half of their worship to God. They weren't bringing the full sacrifice to God. And when we look at John 4 verse 24, it says what? Spirit and truth. If we do it in the right way, and we don't do it with the right spirit, it's just like those Jews were doing it back in Malachi. Half-heartedly. Despising God and not doing it out of the right spirit. We think about it. God does not put off anything that despises Him as far as cursing. You know, think about, we talk about Acts 5, verses 1 through 11, Ananias and Sapphira. We know the story very, very well. Now, Ananias and Sapphira determined that they were going to make a sacrifice, sell a piece of land, and then give it as an offering to God. But they determined among themselves that they would only give part of it, but make a claim to have given the whole thing to them. And we know the story very well, and what the outcome was, how that Ananias first told a lie about the sacrifice, and God struck him dead immediately. And how Sapphira came in after him, and Peter asked her the same question. And she agreed with what Ananias had said. God struck her dead immediately. And oftentimes, and I've even said it myself, well, thank God, God doesn't curse mankind like He did Ananias and Sapphira by striking them dead on the spot when they lied to God. But we have to be very careful about that. Just because God does not curse us with physical death when we fail to offer worship truly to God, and we make a pretense as to what we're doing when we worship God, God does condemn that. This day, if I'm not worshiping wholeheartedly and completely as God has commanded me, I am receiving from God a curse. I'm not in the right relationship with God. If something were to happen to me, and I should die upon this thing and have done that, I would not be in the right relationship with God. When we worship God, we have to offer everything like God prescribed, in spirit and in truth. But yet we want to say, well, we might be able to get away with it for a little while and get our lives right before it's too late. God's not going to strike us dead. But God may not strike us dead, but it could cost us our soul in eternity because we fail to worship God like He prescribes when we're here. Here's what God had to say about what true worship truly is in Psalm 51, verses 16 and 17. For thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit and a broken and a contrite heart. O God, thou wilt not despise. Human nature is to look at the things that are physical in nature. How well we sing. How well we humble ourselves when we partake of the Lord's Supper and think about that sacrifice. But God is not so interested with the physical aspects of our worship as He is with what's going on inside yours and my heart. That's what He's looking at. And that's what we need to be sure that we have in check as we worship. Right worship begins long before one enters the building to worship. It begins, first of all, with the establishment of the right relationship with God. In Amos chapter 5 and verse 18, it says, Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord, to what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. Here the Jews were excited about coming before the Lord, and it's interesting that it notes the day of the Lord as the first day of the week we know is the day of the Lord. But it comes darkness and not light. For those who are not worshiping correctly, it is darkness as opposed to light. It's wrong as far as being a benefit if we're not worshiping right. Amos goes on to say in verse 21 that God says, I despise your feast days. I will not smell your solemn assemblies. Though you offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beasts. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. God does not look so much at the outward things that are going on, but He wants judgment and righteousness. He wants us to have our hearts right with Him on the inside. He despises the things that we do if our hearts aren't right. He goes on to say in Amos chapter 5, Ye have offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, O house of Israel. But ye have borne the tabernacle of Moloch and chewed your images, the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves. Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, and the Lord whose name is the God of hosts. God said, you have offered these sacrifices. You've been doing this worship over and over and over again. But realistically, what have you got in your mind? He describes it as Moloch, the God of the heathen that were around the Israelites. Sure, they were offering and prescribing their offerings to God Almighty, Jehovah God, the God that delivered them out of Egypt. But yet, they were holding on to the false gods that were around them. When we think about the worship that God accepts us, we have to let go of the world around us in order to be able to worship God acceptably. We can't drag God of this world into the worship service and expect to be pleasing to God. He will reject it. He will send us into captivity just like He did promise the children of Israel. Our worship can't be tainted. It can't be half-hearted. It can't be just a mediocre offering to God. Think about what Jesus said in Matthew 5. Therefore, if they bring thy gift to the altar, and there remembers that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way, and first be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. If we're going to offer worship to God, our relationships have to be right. Our relationships to God have to be right. Our relationships with our fellow men have to be right. We can't come in and just do something half-hearted. When we think about half-hearted worship, think about the story of the Samaritan that we talked about Wednesday night. That man knew the Bible. That man knew the law. That man knew how to worship. But yet, his relationship to his fellow man was such that he didn't have the right spirit towards God and couldn't worship God effectively. And he set about to justify himself rather than trying to change his life and make it right so that he had the ability, the right to worship God. Verse 26, Jesus said this. We're beginning verse 25. Agree with thine adversary quickly while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost part. When we think about our offering of worship to God, and it being only a half-hearted effort that we're doing, Jesus said, unless you've got everything right, including your relationship with God, your relationship with man, that you're going to be condemned for it. And there's not going to be a light condemnation. You're going to pay everything that is earned with a false worship. Worship can only come from a person who has a pure heart. Proverbs 15, verse 8. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is His delight. Psalms 24. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in His holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul into vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Salvation and righteousness are connected. Righteousness and worship are connected. We all go about sometimes trying to divide it out, our lives, and put worship in a box here and our lives in a box there. It doesn't work that way. They're connected. Worship is just as connected to the life that we live as anything else in life. Worship comes from a loving heart. Jesus said, He that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he is that loveth me, and he loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him, and will manifest myself unto him. If we want to be close to God, we want to be close to Christ, if we want to worship effectively and get the most out of it, it's going to be because we love the words of Christ. Verse 23, Jesus answered and said to him, If a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come in unto him and make our abode with him. The purpose of worship is both for man and for God. We've looked in detail about what God's attitude is toward those who would have a bad heart in worshiping Him. But we are to glorify God and to praise God. That is the benefit of worship that is offered to God. David said in Psalms 117, Oh, praise the Lord, all ye nations. Praise Him, all ye people. For His merciful kindness is great toward us, and the truth of the Lord endureth forever. Worship is to be brought because it brings glory and praise to God. But we do it also for our benefit. Not in the sense of what the world does many times, or the religious world that is going in the wrong direction. They do it first and foremost out of a heart of what can be provided to them. What do I get out of worship? What is the benefit to me? We can't go into worship with that attitude and with that heart. We have to go into it with what we're supposed to be giving to God. But we get as a reciprocal part of worship a benefit to ourselves as well. Colossians 3:15, speaking specifically about the singing aspect of our worship, says, "And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also you're called in one body, and be ye thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord." The peace of God is a benefit that we get in true worship to God when our hearts are right and when we're doing it for the right reason. Worship is a command. And that's what we get hung up on a lot of times. We can go back to Exodus 20 where God said to the children of Israel, "You're to worship me and me only. You're not to have any other gods before me." We understand that worship is what God desires of mankind today. John 4 verse 23, Jesus said to the woman at the well, the time is coming and the hour now is when the true worship of God will worship God in spirit and truth, for such is what God seeks. It is a command. It is something to be followed. But we don't do it just because of the command aspect of it. When we talked about it, when we started out thinking about we're going to church or we're going to worship, that comes from a heart many times of an attitude of command, rather than a spirit of appreciation and love for a God who has been so good to us. Peter said this in 1 Peter 2 and verses 3 through 5. "If so be ye have tasted the Lord is gracious, to whom coming as unto a live living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious, ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and a holy priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Christ Jesus." Peter said there, if you've tasted that the Lord is gracious. When we realize and understand how great, gracious, and loving God has been for us in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross for us, that produces in us a heart that is one that will truly worship God in spirit as well as in truth. We think about the right heart in worship and the return that a person has on that. You know, as people, we often look at the idea of what is our return on investment? What am I going to get out of it? Whether it be in the financial markets or, livestock, whatever it is. People want to know how much time and energy and money have I put into this and what is my return on investment? True worship, one that is worshiped in spirit, is a very wise use of our time. Can you think of anything that would be more a better use of our time than that of worshiping God correctly? It is a wise investment of our resources. We think about waste in our lives, in our time, and so many things that we do. When we think about what truly does not waste our time is when we worship God in an effective way. The greatest benefit comes to you and me because of that. When we think about our worship, think about what David said in Psalms 95. "Oh, come, let us sing unto the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving, and make a joyful noise unto him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. In his hand are the deep places of the earth. The strength of the hills is his also. The sea is his, and he made it. His hands formed the dry land. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you will, hear his voice." Where do you and I stand as we worship God this morning? Is my heart one such that as I offer my worship to God, that he is going to hear me because I love and appreciate all that he is and all that he's done? If it's not, I need to make that right. I need to be sure that God will accept me and my person for the worship that I offer. And so do you. This morning, if you're not a child of God, if you're not a Christian, you can't offer up the worship to God. If you've reached the age of accountability and you know the difference between right and wrong, and you know that you've done what is contrary to the Lord, and you're not willing to make it right by becoming a child of God, God will not accept that worship. You need to obey what Jesus said to become a child of God, and hearing and believing. Repenting of your sins and confessing Jesus Christ as the Son of God, then being baptized to become a child of God, having your sins forgiven, and having the ability, the right, the privilege to be able to worship God in spirit and in truth. We sing a song, "Where is your heart, O pilgrim? What does your life reveal?" Our life reveals our worship. If it's not right, then we can't worship God. And as children of God, we can look at our lives and see what our life reveals. If it's one of sin and contradiction to God, then we fall into that category of despising God and offering up worship to God. But we can change that. We can change it by making our lives right, by repenting of the sin that's in our lives, confessing it as publicly as it is, and then praying to God for forgiveness, and being able then to offer to our God praise and the honor and the glory that He so deserves. How has your worship been this morning? You and I both know whether or not our worship has been acceptable to God based upon our lives and the life that it reveals. If you need to make a change so that you can worship God effectively and be pleasing to Him, I want to encourage you to think about it seriously and do whatever needs to be done while together we stand.
Someday you'll stand at the bar of life. Someday you'll see. Someday you'll answer the question of why. Why do you answer me? What will it be? What will it be? Where will you sit to eternity? What will it be? Oh, what will it be? What will your answer be? Sadly, you'll stand in your unprepared. Trembling, you'll fall on your knees. Facing the servants of life or of death, what will that sentence be? What will it be? What will it be? Where will you spend your eternity? What will it be? Oh, what will it be? What will your answer be? Now is the time to prepare, my friend. Make your soul spotless and free. Washed in the blood of the crucified one. He will your answer be. What will it be? What will it be? Where will you spend your eternity? What will it be? Oh, what will it be? What will your answer be? Song for the Lord's Supper will be number 742. 742. One after man and one who's cross. Number 742. When I survey the wondrous cross, on which the Prince of Glory died, my riches gain I
Dear Heavenly Father, we're gathered around that table this morning, remember the death of the Son, Christ. We offer thanks for this bread which represents Christ's body that was crucified for our sins. May we all take in worthy manner in Christ's name we pray. Redeem and came to you and thank you for your dying, which is Christian virtues and sins of blood, shed on the cross for the sin of our sins. Good the ones that take you at the hip and the Lord,
Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for another day of the week we can come together and worship. May you please be with us throughout the give us our means to give cheerfully and as we prosper in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you all for being here this morning. Hope we can see you back again tonight at 6 o'clock for evening service. We have a few announcements before we dismiss this morning. I want to remember those that are on our prayer list. It is great to see Brother John with us. Continue to pray for Sister Dot and her health. She's been battling some things these last few weeks. Continue to pray for Nancy Meacham and Evelyn Mitchell, Bree Atkins. It is good to see Ronnie Marshall with us today. Continue to pray for him and his mother, Scott Coffin. I want to continue to pray for Melvin McCray, Paul Brown, Jim Hicks, Deanne Juice. Also want to keep Kim Miller in our prayers. She's battling cancer. And then Wayne Ellis, Sister Evelyn's brother, Brother Ron was telling us this morning that the treatments that he was taking were having a very bad effect on him, very bad impact, especially his lungs. So they're changing his treatment. So we continue to pray for that, and hopefully they can find some relief in those treatments that they're giving him now. As far as our upcoming events, we want to remind the men of the business meeting that we'll have next Sunday at 5 p.m. That'll be the second Sunday of this month. We'll have a men's business meeting. Our family holiday will be this Saturday, November 11th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. If you would like to help in preparations for the family holiday, see Rob. They've got a lot of things that can be done, and love all the help that we can get in that work. We have the canned food drive. If you want to bring any canned food for this month, there are some crates in the back there. I don't have the date right now for the just service time. The last day of the month is the 26th. We usually do it on that day. We'll have that finalized for now. Right. Our internalization verse for this week comes from Job chapter 1, verse 21, and said, "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. That's all the announcements that I have this morning. If there's anything that I've left off, or if there's any additions or things that I need to update, please see me. I'll be happy to do that tonight in our second service.
Our closing song is number 684. Number 684. This world is not my home. We'll sing the first and the last verse. You have to stand and sing back. Number 684, first and last verse. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory and with eternity. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their songs of sweetest praises back from heaven's shore. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord,
place, especially one of us as we leave, as we said here this morning, examine our lives and make adjustments as needed, especially probably we're not all in for Christ. Help us, Father, to do the things we need to do, especially with our family and friends. Help us reach out to those that are sick physically and spiritually this week. Take them to take them back to us. Be with us all and bless us. Keep us always in thy care. As we ask in Jesus' name.
Tyler, how you doing?
All right, man. How you doing?
How you doing?
Appreciate it.
It's real fancy. I noticed the other place of that.
Good job.
I don't even have one.
Lesson.
Thank you. Be careful.
Be careful, man.
I don't know.
How long will it take you?
Come on.
Yeah, I can hear you up there snoring and hear it out when I come out on the deck.
Yeah.
Still there.
He didn't snort yesterday. So that plug man dropped in his tracks and it was bad enough. He's going to so me and my dad and my brother over 2 hours.
Kill it. I'm like, oh,
Kill it. I said, "It's in the whole thing. Kill it." And his glass is in the orange right. Yeah.
you're through for the year now.
You want to see what? See what?
I've seen a lot of people this year.
Yeah. Alright, let me see what I'm doing. Set.
Hey, Seth.
Set. Come on, Jeremy. You ready? Hey, you tell me about it? Let's go to a Bible class.
It was long. Especially in the car. Come on, we'll take your car. I got her car.